So today we'll do a buckling test, which is buckling of a column. Um, and you have already studied the theory of this subject um, in probably first year, second semester. So about three semesters ago, and I think you can brush up the theory for that part, or you probably remember part of it. I'll go through the theory actually, and after that we'll discuss. We probably had gone through these topics as well. So we'll discuss all of this. All of these are relevant for today's experiment. But before going into the details of today's experiment, I would like to point out something regarding the reports. So you mentioned that you had the previous applied mechanics laboratory class with Professor Chandu, and I'm surprised with the type of reports that I have got, the ones that you have submitted. For some people, like filling up the instruction sheet was the entire report, and accordingly, I have graded. Okay, and I have submitted, your evaluations. Okay, uh, in the classroom. So those actually very few of you have scored above 80%. So that is A. Within 65 to 80% is B, and below 65% is C, and that below might also be as low as less than 50%. So, so I have shared those grades, and I had actually also mentioned during the class what should be in your report. Actually, what I've found is there is no discussion of the theory. So we do usually an hour of discussion on the theory, and that is totally absent from your report. And it is quite evident that the textbook that I mentioned, the lab report, you have found yourself nowhere near that. Okay, so that is also very evident from the type of reports that I have got. Okay, so what you are going to do is up to you, but that I'm looking for quality reports, and does uh, that the quality of the report does matter. That's what I wanted to convey. And let's now focus on today's class. So before going into the details of what type of deformation buckling is, we will start from where the discussion started in your textbook. So we will take an example of this column right here, which is the so-called fixed free column. Okay, so basically it is fixed at one end, the other end is free. So had this been a horizontal member, you would be calling it a cantilever beam. Okay, so it is just the cantilever equivalent of a column, and of course, because it's a column, it carries an axial load. So it carries an axial compressive load, like the one right there. Okay, and and what we would expect is that typically we would expect that deformation occurs something like this. This diagram is quite exaggerated. So basically what is happening is the column is being compressed, and since it is being compressed, we know there is a change in the lateral dimension due to Poisson's ratio, and we know what happens with tensile loading, right? So if the elongation happens in the x direction, in y and z there would be compression or contraction. The reverse happens when you apply a compressive load. So the circumference bulges out. So but that happens for so long. Okay, and that is actually the equilibrium configuration. So if I draw the free body diagram of the column, so this is what you are receiving. Of course, this being a fixed support, you are capable of receiving the following. So I'll call this one as O, this point. So you are capable, this support is capable of providing this sort of reactions, OX, OY, and then, okay, I'm not sure whether I'm choosing the correct direction. Let's go with counterclockwise. So MO, these are the three supports that are possible. Okay, but eventually we would realize that these two components are simply zero, and this is just equal to P, and that gives you the equilibrium. Okay, but there is certain value of P called P critical, where more than one equilibrium configurations are possible. Okay, and what could be the other equilibrium configuration? Of course, this column cannot violate the kinematic boundary condition. This right here is called a kinematic boundary condition, which basically says if the deflection along x-axis is W, so W, and let's say this axis right here is y-axis with origin at O. So W at y equals 0 is 0. Not only that, W prime at y equals 0 is also 0. So these are the boundary conditions. So this is what you cannot violate, okay, when you are talking about a second equilibrium configuration. Okay, so we are talking about a situation where either of these two can be an equilibrium configuration. Okay, now what is the second configuration that I didn't mention? So in that case, let's say this is the y-axis, or this is the original the elastica of the member, and let's say this is how now it is deflecting. Column is now deflecting something like this, obeying the kinematic boundary conditions, and this is where P is being applied. Okay. Now we totally discarded this this possibility, okay, because this support, as you can see, is quite capable of providing moments, okay, but we still discarded that this configuration might happen. But this time now we are considering that this configuration could also happen. Okay. So over here, as usual, we would write the general expressions for all the support reactions. Okay. And simply by solving the equations of equilibrium, we would realize that this quantity is nothing but 0. This quantity is simply P, and this quantity right here is P times, let's say, this maximum deflection right here, we call it delta. So P times delta is the bending moment. Okay. So see, for the derivation that I'm about to do, I don't need to show what are the support reactions. Okay, and you would see that in a minute. But the reason I went with that free body diagram and to give you the support reactions were to show you that this configuration not necessarily violates the equilibrium configuration. Not necessarily violates equilibrium. So this is a feasible equilibrium configuration. Okay, that means the two vertical forces are P, and the support moment is P times delta, which would basically give you an equilibrium. Okay, so why did we not consider that in the first place? Was so that's what you try to show, Okay, we will try to show that in order to have the equilibrium configuration of type 2, we need to have a spatial value of a uh, one or multiple spatial values of p, which is the p critical. Okay, so only on those values of p that this thing can happen. Okay, so now let's talk about the deflection at any given y. So you are at any given y, this much is your deflection from the neutral axis, let's say. So that is w. And if I take a free body diagram at y, so there is I'm just directly writing the non-zero components. So there is p and p, and then there is p times w minus delta minus w, the restoring moment. So if I write down the equation of deflection, ei w double prime is okay, and once I take it to the other side, which can be simplified as w double prime. So E and I hope you understand, is the Young's modulus and the moment of inertia. Now, which moment of inertia? This is obviously not polar moment of inertia. Let's say this is the cross section. Okay, I'm just assuming a rectangular cross section. Then this is the moment of inertia about the centroidal axis, which looks like this one. So I'm actually looking for the smaller moment of inertia. Okay, because you see, if I had chosen the horizontal axis, the moment of inertia about the horizontal axis would be a lot higher compared to the vertical axis. Okay, so I'm just looking for the smaller moment of inertia right here, and then I would write it as lambda squared w equals lambda squared times p, and this is the governing differential equation for the deformation of the column, where lambda squared is defined as, and this is a definition symbol, that is p divided by ei. Okay, and the solution to this equation, this is a linear ordinary differential equation, because only one independent variable is involved. Linear because there is no w double prime times w or w double prime to the power half or anything. So this is a linear differential equation, and also it is a second order linear ODE. Okay, and basically this is a boundary value problem. I mean, we do encounter equations like this. We did encounter an equation like this when we were talking about simple harmonic motion of a simple or a compound pendulum. But that was an initial value problem because that problem was in time. This time it is not the case. This time there is a physical coordinate is involved. So this one is a boundary value problem, and you are actually supposed to provide the boundary for both the bottom and the top end. But as it turns out, both the boundary conditions on the deflection or on W are on the bottom end. So these are the boundary conditions. Oh, these are the boundary conditions. Okay. So you now try to solve for this configuration. Now we know how to solve this equation. There would be one complementary function, the other one being a particular integral. So the W complementary function is of course C0 cos lambda y and C1 sine lambda y. That remains there because that is basically the solution of the homogeneous part of the equation. Basically, this thing is a solution, general solution of W double prime and lambda squared times W equals 0. Why do we need to solve the complementary function? Just to arrive at these two constants of integration. We know that every time we integrate a differential equation or a differential for that matter, so we would encounter constant of integration, and for the second order differentiation we would encounter two of them. So that's what we are doing here, and that can be obtained through complementary function. And then there is the particular integral, which would be simply, because this can be written as d squared plus lambda squared times W equals lambda squared times delta, where d squared x is where dx is basically dx dy, and d squared x is d2x dy2. So the particular integral is this thing divided by so lambda squared automatically cancels out, and if we extend this further, if we write this expression, d squared divided by lambda squared inverse times delta, and do a binomial expansion, every time we encounter terms of d or d squared or anything, any non-zero power of d up to infinity. So basically for a constant term, that becomes 0. So eventually the particular integral is delta. So the final function W equals delta plus C0 cos lambda y plus C1 sine lambda y. Okay. Now if we satisfy the first boundary condition, so at y equals 0, this term automatically goes to 0, and then we have C0 equals minus delta, and then W prime at y equals 0 would be minus C0 lambda sine 0 plus C1 lambda times cos 0, which is 1. And that is supposed to be 0, which basically implies C1 equals 0. And eventually, after all of this exercise, we have the final expression for lambda, for W, which is 1 minus cos lambda y. Okay. So we can now erase everything else. Okay. So let's just revisit what we did in relation to buckling. So we established that configuration 2 can be an equilibrium configuration. Okay. And for that equilibrium configuration, we tried to find out uh, the nature of the curve, the way W changes with Y. Okay. But after all that, we need to, so we wrote down the expression for bending moment, okay, as P times delta minus W. We did that. Okay. But for us, visually, that information is there that this delta is the maximum deflection or the tip deflection. But that information is not with the mathematics that we used. So with the derivation, this was just a constant term that was present in the expression of the bending moment. Okay. Now we need to introduce that W at y equals L equals delta, where L is the actual length of the column. Okay. And again, there are a lot of considerations. For example, the column right here is a slender member, which is to say that all the equations of beam deformation is valid on this one. All the equations of Euler-Bernoulli beam, basically the equation that we used to get the expression for deflection, that is valid on this one. What do I mean by slender is that it's dimensions of its cross section, let's say B for this one, H for this one, and both of these quantities, they may be one may be smaller than the other, but they are both much smaller than L. That's what is slender. What else is valid? I mean, not only is it uniform throughout the cross section and all, so every assumption that we have relation to beams, okay, so that should be valid in this case. Achha. Now this information needs to be provided to this expression right here, because that information is missing from this expression. See, if we do provide that, then we have this expression. Okay. So now we know one thing. If this has to be an equilibrium configuration, this condition must be satisfied. That is, what is that condition? The condition is cos lambda times L equals 0. Or in other words, lambda times L is an odd multiple of pi by 2. And basically, in general, okay, where n is the mode number. So there are multiple modes in which the buckling might happen. Okay. But if I now look into the expression of lambda being the square root of P by EI, so the expression for P becomes, for n equals 1, pi squared EI divided by 4L squared. And if we take, let's say, mode number 2, that becomes 9 times pi squared EI by 4L squared. So as we can see, now this load for which this mode becomes possible, that we would call as the critical load. And as you can see, the critical load for first mode of buckling is the smallest. And if you are, let's say, gradually increasing P with time, the moment you encounter P critical for first mode is where the buckling happens right away. So you not as often see higher modes of buckling. That's the point I'm trying to make here. Okay, so mostly you see the column buckling in its first mode. Okay, which, as it turns out, is a sinusoidal equation. Please note the difference. Okay, if I have a cantilever beam with a tip load, that beam would deform like a cubic equation, like a polynomial, whereas the equation of the buckling mode is sinusoidal. Okay. Now we would so basically this is a time where we discuss a little bit about buckling. Okay, so what just happened? So so there were two modes of buckling, two modes of equilibrium. One was direct compression, and other one was buckling. Okay, and if your P is less than P critical, okay, so this is the only mode that is possible. But when your P equates P critical, and there is no third case, there is no P greater than P critical. Okay, both the modes are possible. Now you might ask, how do I know both modes are possible? You remember one thing, that we did all the derivation regarding P critical, which was let's say pi squared EI by 4L squared. Now this is a fixed value, which is, if you know, let's say E equals 200 gigapascal, I equals, let's say, 10 to the power minus 4 meters squared, and if you know L to be, let's say, 3-meter column. Okay, so definitely you can find out a fixed value of P critical. But what you cannot find out definitely is the value of delta. The fact is, for any arbitrary delta, this configuration is an equilibrium configuration. For any arbitrary value, there is no fixed value. You see, we started the derivation, we started deriving the expression for the deflection, which we got something like this. Okay. We started this derivation by assuming an arbitrary delta. We got this expression with an arbitrary delta. Then we substituted that arbitrary delta as the value of W at Y equals L. But never did we talk about how much that delta should be. And the fact is, this configuration becomes an equilibrium configuration when P equals P critical for any arbitrary delta. Okay, that includes delta equals 0. And you know what is the configuration with delta equals 0? This is the configuration with delta equals 0. And this also answers why we should be concerned about buckling. Think of deformation of a ductile material. So once it goes past the yield point, okay, the simplest model could be an elastic, perfectly plastic material. Of course, it's a model, but let's say it represents the reality to reasonable accuracy. Okay, so the material is kind of elastic and perfectly plastic. And the moment you go beyond this, or you are at this sigma y, each of these configuration is possible. One is, being on the elastic curve, the other one is being on the plastic curve. Both are possible. And you could be sailing along the plastic curve and could be having enormous amount of plastic deformation and ultimately leading to failure. Same thing happens with buckling, but for buckling, the curve is slightly different. This side there is P, and this side there is delta, and the limiting value of P is P critical. But for buckling, the curve is not elastic perfectly plastic. The curve is actually rigid and perfectly plastic. So as long as P is below P critical, the delta would be 0. The moment P reaches P critical, any arbitrary delta is a solution. And in either case, these 2 points are called bifurcation points. Bifurcation as in, 2 configurations which are possible. Okay. So, this bifurcates into the second curve, this, this flat curve right here. And any arbitrary amount of deflection can happen, okay, which ultimately leads to failure. And that's why we should be concerned with a structure having the possibility of having a buckling deformation. Okay. Now there is one more difference between these 2 configurations. So this one right here is a material failure. If we really want to talk about yielding as failure, which it is not necessarily true, but let's say if we consider yielding to be failure, so this one is a material failure. Okay. And in this case, you see we only used, if you look at the expression for lambda, that has P divided by EI. If you look at P critical, that has EI. So we never, really considered that the structure could be deforming outside of the elastic, elastic zone, or outside of the elastic limit. So the material is well within elastic limit, but this failure occurs because of the deformations of the geometry. Okay. Now, these are the things that I'm saying only for you to realize or, absorb the phenomena of buckling. A lot of things are happening right there. But why did, the question we should ask at this point is, why did, the curve, the material went from having this, completely vertical representation to this completely horizontal representation? The thing is, during this entire process of deformation, even in the buckling, we are only applying an axial load and no transverse load or lateral load. No lateral load, only axial load. And structures such as a beam or a column can be treated as springs, where they have stiffness in all directions. So deflection in X, deflection in Y, rotation about Z. In all directions, there would be reactions. So for example, if you want to cause deflection of this cantilever, in the lateral direction, you must apply a force in the lateral direction. If you want to cause a deflection in longitudinal direction, you must apply a force in the longitudinal direction. But all along, we were only applying an axial load to the structure. Then why did suddenly it buckled? It started having lateral deflection. And that too of an arbitrary amount. So delta could be anything. Delta could be 0, delta could be anything non-zero. Delta could be positive or delta could be negative. The only answer to that is that the moment you reach that P equals P critical, stiffness against Uy becomes 0. So the stiffness against this deflection zero. Okay. How to understand this? The thing is, think of a guitar string. Okay. Think of a rope that you use to dry your clothes. Okay. So in either case, if they were not been tight enough, they are not been under a substantial amount of tension. Okay, they would not be able to carry the lateral load. For example, if you are using a rope to dry your clothes, the two ends must be tied very tightly so that the rope is under substantial amount of tension, and the presence of that axial tension gives the rope a stiffness, a finite stiffness in the lateral direction. And by virtue of that lateral stiffness, that the rope can carry the weight of the clothes that are being dried over it. Okay, so in an axial tensile load actually gives you additional stiffness in the lateral direction, because as we know, the rope on its own cannot barely even support its own weight. Okay, so only under the application of an axial tensile load that the rope can support addition, not only its own weight but also the additional weight of the clothes on it. Similar thing happens to a guitar string. So if you want to go for a higher tune, you tighten the string, right? So what does that do? It increases the stiffness in the lateral direction, and therefore the mass remains constant. So therefore the natural frequency increases, square root of k by m, in simplest term, and therefore the notes sound higher. So the reverse is also true. Now consider a structure which normally can support load in the lateral direction. Okay, but if you now apply compressive load in the axial direction, that will actually gradually reduce its capability to bear load in the lateral direction. And there is a difference between the stiffness increasing and stiffness decreasing. The stiffness increasing can happen for a substantial amount of time, but when you are decreasing the stiffness, at certain point that can also become zero. And at that very point, any amount of lateral deflection can happen even without the application of a lateral load. So if we are talking about stiffness in lateral direction, so let's say that stiffness in lateral direction is kx. Sorry, it should not be uy, it should be ux. So kx, and that has become 0. Multiply that with ux. So this is exactly the amount of force that you need to cause the deflection in lateral direction. And that's what happens in buckling. So buckling as a phenomena or phenomenon is important both in the mathematical sense, also in the the structural deformation point of view. Okay, because even in structural deformation we do encounter similar situation. So this deformation in the second diagram and this first diagram look very similar, but they are coming from two different sources. In one case, the material goes beyond elastic limit. In the other case, the material is well within elastic limit, it's because of the geometric nature of it that the material fails. The structure fails. Material doesn't fail here. Okay. Okay, so now, আচ্ছা এই অবধি কি ক্লিয়ার সবার?
স্যার kx টা কি করে 0 হচ্ছে একবার বলুন।
kx টা কিভাবে 0 হচ্ছে? দেখো kx টা কিভাবে 0 হচ্ছে তার জন্য ম্যাথমেটিক্যাল ডেরিভেশন আছে, সেটা আমি করে দেখাতে পারি, ঠিক আছে, কিন্তু সেটা একটু টাইম কনজিউমিং, ঠিক আছে। সো লেটস নট গো ইনটু দ্য ম্যাথমেটিক্যাল ডেরিভেশন। এমনও নয় যে ম্যাথমেটিক্যাল ডেরিভেশন থেকে সবটা বুঝতেও পারবে। আচ্ছা ইনফ্যাক্ট এটা ছোট করে দেখানো যায় নাকি? ধরো সামহাও একটা স্ট্রাকচার এরম ভাবে ডিফর্ম করে গেছে, ঠিক আছে, পুরোপুরি অ্যাক্সিয়াল নেই, একটু ডিফ্লেক্ট করে গেছে, অ্যান্ড দেয়ার ডিফ্লেকশন ইজ ডব্লিউ, ঠিক আছে। এবার ধরো আমি একটা অ্যাক্সিয়াল টেনসাইল লোড অ্যাপ্লাই করছিলাম, লেটস কল ইট টি। তাহলে এখানে আমি রিয়াকশন কি পাবো? টি, ঠিক আছে। এবার এই ল্যাটারাল ডিফ্লেকশনের জন্য ধরো আমি পি অ্যাপ্লাই করেছিলাম, ইকুইলিব্রিয়াম আগে কি বলবে, এখানে আমি একটা পি পাবো, ঠিক আছে। এবার ধরো এই টিটা 0, তাহলে আমি বেন্ডিং মোমেন্ট কত পাবো, which is trying to restore the configuration. রেস্টোরিং বেন্ডিং মোমেন্ট আমি পাবো হচ্ছে পি টাইমস এল। এই অবধি কোনো ভুল নেই তো? ক্যান্টিলিভার বিম বোঝা যাচ্ছে এই বারটা?
হ্যাঁ।
টিটা 0 ছিল, এবার ধরো টিটা আমি নন 0 করে দিলাম, টিটা যেই আমি নন 0 করে দিলাম, দেখো আমার যেই সরি একটা কি ভুল হলো, টি এর মোমেন্টটা হচ্ছে কাউন্টার ক্লকওয়াইজ, পি এরটা হচ্ছে ক্লকওয়াইজ অ্যান্ড এম এরটা হচ্ছে কাউন্টার ক্লকওয়াইজ। ওকে 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 হ্যাঁ, যেই আমি টি অ্যাপ্লাই করলাম এই মোমেন্টটা টি ডাব্লিউ কমে গেল, তো বুঝতে পারছো কি হলো?
হ্যাঁ,
যে আমি টি অ্যাপ্লাই করলাম টি ডাব্লিউ কমে গেল, ঠিক আছে। তাহলে বেন্ডিং মোমেন্ট কমে গেলে কি হবে? বেন্ডিং মোমেন্ট কমে গেলে কি হবে? দুবার ইন্টিগ্রেট করতে পারো তুমি, কিন্তু বাংলা কথাটা হচ্ছে বেন্ডিং মোমেন্ট কমে গেলে ডিফ্লেকশন কম হবে, তাই তো? বুঝতে পারছো তো টি কি করছে? টি বিমটাকে উল্টো দিকে ঘুরিয়ে দেওয়ার চেষ্টা করছে, পি যেদিকে ঘোরাচ্ছে টি তার উল্টো দিকে ঘুরিয়ে দেওয়ার চেষ্টা করছে, এটা তো বোঝা যাচ্ছে?
হ্যাঁ স্যার,
বোঝা যাচ্ছে তো? এই যে বেন্ডিং মোমেন্টটা কমে গেল, তাহলে কি হবে? আলটিমেটলি ডিফ্লেকশনটা কমে যাবে। তার মানে কি, তুমি আগে গিভেন অ্যামাউন্ট অফ পি তে যতটা ডিফ্লেকশন পাচ্ছিলে এখন পাবে না, কম পাবে ডিফ্লেকশন। এবার যদি ডিনোমিনেটরটা কমে যায় স্টিফনেসটা বেড়ে যায়, ঠিক আছে। এবার যদি স্টিফনেসটা বেড়ে যাওয়া বুঝতে অসুবিধা না থাকে আন্ডার টেনশন, এই টিটাই নেগেটিভ হয়ে গেলে আন্ডার কম্প্রেশন স্টিফনেসটা কমে যাওয়া সেটা বুঝতে অসুবিধা হচ্ছে কি?
হ্যাঁ মানে স্যার টিটা উল্টো দিকে থাকলে আমার স্টিফনেসটা কমে যাবে।
স্টিফনেসটা কমে যাবে এবং কমতে কমতে এক জায়গায় গিয়ে 0 হয়ে যেতে পারে, এবং তখন ইউ গেট আরবিট্রারি নন জিরো ডেল্টা ফর আ জিরো ল্যাটারাল লোড, ঠিক আছে। and that's what is buckling. Material is well within elastic limit, ঠিক আছে। and that only depends on the following parameters: the Young's modulus, the moment of inertia, and the length. So basically geometric parameters I and L, and this E right here Young's modulus, I mean, that still is a material parameter, but that is well within the elastic limit, right? It's in the elastic limit that you can use the Young's modulus as the parameter. তো এই হচ্ছে গল্প বাকলিং এর, ঠিক আছে? এবার আমরা যাব হচ্ছে টু ডিরাইভ Euler buckling equation. Okay, and for that we need to consider the second column. And since you have already done that exercise, so we are talking about pinned column. Okay, so this column right here, pinned at either end. কিন্তু শুধু তো পিন করলে চলবে না, তার সঙ্গে যেটা করতে হবে, এটাকে একটা ব্লকের উপর বসাতে হবে, সেই ব্লকটাকে রোলার সাপোর্ট করতে হবে এবং একটা গ্রুভ করতে হবে যার মধ্যে দিয়ে এই রোলার ব্লকটা ট্রাভেল করতে পারে। তা না হলে কি হবে, স্ট্রাকচারটাকে অ্যাক্সিয়ালি, মানে ইনিশিয়ালি ইট কম্প্রেসেস অ্যাক্সিয়ালি, রাইট? তো সেই অ্যাক্সিয়াল কম্প্রেশনটা আমরা দেবো কি করে যদি ইট ইজ নট অ্যালাউড টু মুভ অ্যাক্সিয়ালি? It has to be allowed to move axially, right? So this is the P that I'm applying, and this is the column right here, and I'm just drawing the elastica. Okay, and I'm just drawing the buckling mode of it. When it is not buckling, it would be simply axially compressed along this center line of its. So when I've gone when P equals P critical, that's what is happening. It is buckling. And if I really look closely to this buckling mode right here, cut it in the middle with an imaginary line, draw a tangent. So what do we have? It's like that fixed free column, but 2 times over. So on the top, there is a fixed free column. So the slope right here is 0. And if I consider this one as the origin, in terms of configuration. So basically for this one, if the length is L, then P critical is pi squared EI. P critical is the critical value of the load for which each of these half columns, which are basically fixed free columns, would buckle. So the length of those half columns are L by 2 and L by 2. So 4 times L by 2 whole squared, or pi squared EI by L squared, and that right here is the Euler buckling equation. Now today I have mentioned the name of famous mathematician. Yeah, that's a humble introduction. Famous mathematician Euler twice. So there was Euler buckling equation, and I mentioned Euler Bernoulli beam. Problem with
Sir, you are muted.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So the crumbling of soda can under torsion is also an example of buckling. The point here is that buckling is not unique to columns, but columns do carry axial compressive load, and hence buckling is a real concern. Acha, now মানে এর আগে আমি ডিসকানেক্টেড হয়ে যাওয়ার আগে কতটা বলেছিলাম?
Sir, we were at the Euler buckling equation.
Euler buckling equation. Okay. Okay, that is fine. Acha. Now let's move on to two more topics that we need to discuss. Number one is eccentricity. The thing is, we might think of the columns as this perfect members where I'm applying all the load along the axis, but we would never be able to apply the load exactly in the middle. Okay. However slender the column might be, there is, although this one is a very exaggerated diagram, but however slender the column might be, that will still have certain dimension to it, and chances are we are either to the to a little left or to the little right of the axis, and that and that added eccentricity, let's say this is where the resultant force R is acting. Okay, so the net force, let's say, is acting at slightly to the right of the axis, and that additional eccentricity E, if you now draw the free body diagram of the column, so if this one is P, then you have P right here, and this additional eccentricity E produces additional moment PE, and when you consider buckling, this moment right here is aids buckling, which basically means this kind of accelerates buckling. Okay, and in presence of buckling, in presence of eccentricity, the load deflection curve is not a step curve. Let's say this one right here is the ideal buckling diagram. With eccentricity, that would simply look like this. So the deflection gradually happens with the increasing load. Because of this, you see, if you had perfect buckling, so unless you have a buckling mode, you do not have a moment. You do not have a moment, because when you have buckling, then you have this deflection, and then you have this restoring moment. Otherwise, it's just two axial forces balancing one another. Okay. Now with eccentricity, you always have the moment, and it is always kind of bending, and because of that bending, this deflection continuously happens. It's not a step. Okay, this is what happens with eccentricity. And you can also imagine what happens if you increase more and more eccentricity. The curve actually deviates more and more from the ideal curve. And one more thing, in buckling with eccentricity, there is it never reaches the theoretical critical force, okay, or the theoretical critical load, uh, and uh, mm, and if the eccentricity increases more and more, that deviation is even more. Now, in reality, every column would be loaded. Okay, in somewhat eccentricity. There is no way you can have a perfect axial loading, and therefore there is no exact, no column which gives you theoretical critical load. But this experiment right here, today's experiment, is all about getting the critical load of the columns. Okay. So when we would be doing experiments today, or what actually we would be looking at, the thing is, much like the tensile test, here we are looking for a given load value at which suddenly the deflection happens at a much faster rate than it was happening earlier. So it is somewhere between. So that is left to the judgment of the eye of the observer, of course, but it still is some representative load value at which the deflection happens at a rapid rate. As you can see, if you are to gradually increase P with time, okay, at certain, so this is how the deflection changes with time. Okay, and that that corresponding P value is what we would regard as the critical load. Okay, and as soon as you reach that kind of critical load, I mean, you cannot really increase the P in the similar way. Okay, you cannot really increase P much after that one. Okay. So that region where the load deflection curve tries to be flat, or the deflection starts happening at a faster rate, is what we identify as the representative critical load. And that critical load you should check would be much smaller, not much smaller, but substantially smaller compared to the theoretical values. Okay, so that is regarding the practical aspect of the of eccentricity. What else is there? Of course, the last topic, long and short columns. So earlier we drew two types of failure curves. I am again considering the ideal buckling scenario. So this is what happens in buckling, which is a geometric failure, as we discussed, because the material is still within elastic limit. It involves geometric nonlinearity. And this one right here, material with elastic, perfectly plastic stress strain diagram. This is what happens with the material. Okay. Now, a column is classified as a short column when it fails with material failure. Buckling is not an issue for that sort of a column. Okay. Whereas a long column is more likely to fail due to buckling than due to material failure. It is likely to stay in the elastic limit when it is failing, and it would be failing due to buckling. Okay, and let's consider a situation where both of these are happening simultaneously. So if the long column fails due to buckling and the short column fails due to material failure, the column that fails simultaneously due to both the effects is the one which is the exact middle value. Okay, which is to say that this P critical is the area A times the sigma y. So on one side it is failing due to buckling, on the other side it is failing due to material failure. Now if I write down the expression for P critical, it is pi squared EI by L effective or L equivalent squared. Okay, so now bring some of the terms from left hand side to right hand side. For instance, L equi V squared divided by I divided by A equals pi squared E divided by sigma y. Now this right here, you might recall, is the radius of gyration squared. And this ratio is called the slenderness ratio. Okay. Now, what is slenderness ratio? It represents how slender the column is. If the length is much larger compared to a representative lateral dimension, where radius of gyration is a representative lateral dimension. I mean, for a circular section, I is pi by 64 d to the power 4, and a is pi by 4 d to the power 4. So the radius of gyration is square root of I divided by a, is basically d by 4 or r by 2, half the radius. So the ratio, slenderness ratio, is basically the ratio of the length to the radius of gyration. And for a exactly middle column, which fails due to both the criteria, this should be pi squared times E divided by sigma y, square root of that. So a column whose slenderness ratio is this quantity right here, okay, for a given material, because these two are material properties, for a given material, that column is a exactly middle column. And a column with a much higher slenderness ratio would be called a long column. A column with a much lower slenderness ratio would be called a short column. Okay, this is just a coherence of or coexistence of both the criteria. Now, if you take the example of steel, mild steel, say, so sigma y is of the order of 200 megapascal at room temperature. Young's modulus 200 gigapascal. So the ratio is around 1000. Pi is around 3.141592654, whatever, but pi squared is approximately 10. So this ratio is approximately square root of 10 to the power 4 for mild steel, say. So this critical slenderness ratio is about 100. So if a column has a slenderness ratio of 200 or 300, you know for sure that column is going to fail due to buckling if it is made of mild steel. And if it is made of mild steel and the slenderness ratio is around 50 or 40 or 30 or 20, you know it is likely to fail due to yielding in compression. Yielding in compression. I know for a fact that some of you would be at the end of semester be talking about short columns fail due to crushing. Okay, the short column fail due to crushing only if the column is made of brittle materials, which is a possibility because in buildings most of the columns are brittle materials. They are made of concrete, right? But what do we mean by crushing? When you have a short column, a really short column made of a brittle material, and you are applying a compressive load. So this is the direction of the compressive load. And if you can, draw 45-degree helices like that of threads, 45-degree helices, and don't just draw them in one direction, draw in the other direction as well. So those are the directions of maximum shear. You see, no material has ever failed due to compression. Compression closes the cracks. If we apply compressive load, you see, brittle materials are stronger in compression. Okay, as if that is not obvious. Every material is strong in compression. Ductile materials are weak, stronger in tension. Ductile materials are stronger in tension than in compression for ductile, because tau y is maximum shear theory predicts that is 0.5 sigma y. Von Mises criteria predicts 0.577 sigma y, which is the more accurate prediction. What happens with brittle materials? For brittle materials, yield stress in tension is, or rather yield stress in shear is this F times sigma y, the general representation F. Now that F for ductile material is 0.5 to 0.6. For brittle material, that F is actually greater than 1 and can be, up to, let's say, 1.5 and at times 2. So the brittle material is stronger in shear than in tension. So when you apply shear load to a piece of chalk, when you apply shear load to a piece of chalk, it doesn't fail due to shear, because if it were to fail due to shear, it would fail on a, perfectly flat surface. What it fails due to is due to a 45-degree helix. And helix on side view would look like a sinusoid. Okay, something like this. And then it fails due to a surface like this. And the failure surface kind of looks like this. So this is your piece of chalk. So it fails at a surface like this. This is how the piece of chalk fails under torsion, because it is weaker in tension. But of course, the yield stress in compression is a lot higher, and it doesn't fail due to compression. So what happens when you apply a compressive load is, you see these lines of shear, the lines of maximum shear, or the planes of maximum shear, which are basically helical planes. So imagine a crack propagating on those surfaces. So this is how a brittle material fails when you apply compressive load. Brittle short column should fail, and that's what is meant by crushing. Okay, so I think you can totally imagine this sort of surface for a brittle material to happen under compressive load. And the reason for such zigzag pattern is having the shear planes right there. Okay, so the next thing is, how do you distinguish? So so the thing is, you can think of, if it is slenderness ratio, if it is, let's say, below 50, the column would probably fail due to material failure. Okay, whether it is through crushing or yielding in compression, that is how it is going to fail. It would be regarded as a short column. And if it is higher than, let's say, several hundreds, let's say 300, it would behave like a long column and fail due to buckling. Now, for the middle region, a mixed mode of failure can be observed. I mean, it is not predictable in which mode it is going to fail, and simultaneously both the modes may occur. Okay, so that is all I wanted to add before you go for the experiment video. So now we can look into the experiment video, but unless you have any question.
স্যার ওই শর্ট কলামে যেটা ব্রিটেল মেটেরিয়াল, ওটাতে স্যার শিয়ার প্লেন গুলো থেকে ফেল করছে কেন? ওটা তো মানে বেশি স্ট্রং হওয়ার কথা।
না, শোনো, দেখো, ডাকটাইল মেটেরিয়ালের জন্য তুমি ভাবতে পারো yield stress in tension is yield stress in compression, ঠিক আছে? ব্রিটেল মেটেরিয়ালের জন্য কিন্তু ওরকম ভাবার জায়গা নেই। এবং যেমন ডাকটাইল মেটেরিয়াল বন্ড মিসেস ক্রাইটেরিয়া ফলো করে, which is symmetric, মানে টেনশন এন্ড কম্প্রেশন ইট ইজ সিমেট্রিক। ব্রিটেল মেটেরিয়ালস ফলো করে হচ্ছে মোর অফ তোমার ড্রাকার-প্রেগার ক্রাইটেরিয়া। তোমাদের ক্লাসে শেখানো হয় না এসব, মাস্টার ডিগ্রিতেও শেখানো হয় না। এগুলো শেখানো হয় সিভিল ইঞ্জিনিয়ারিং এটসেট্রা, যারা ব্রিটেল মেটেরিয়াল নিয়ে কাজ করে। মেকানিক্যাল ইঞ্জিনিয়ার মেটাল নিয়ে কাজ করে, তারা ডাকটাইল মেটেরিয়ালই শেখে, ঠিক আছে? যারা স্ট্রাকচার কনস্ট্রাকশন মানে বিল্ডিং কনস্ট্রাকশন এক্সেট্রা নিয়ে কাজ করে তারা ব্রিটল মেটেরিয়াল নিয়ে শেখে এবং তারা জানে যে ব্রিটল মেটেরিয়ালের জন্য ড্রাকার প্রেগার ক্রাইটেরিয়া ভ্যালিড হয়। এবং সেক্ষেত্রে হচ্ছে যে তোমার ইল স্ট্রেস ইন কম্প্রেশন, এটা হয়তো পড়েও থাকবে কোথাও না কোথাও, দ্য ফেলিয়ার স্ট্রেস ইন কম্প্রেশন is many times higher than the failure stress in tension, 4 to 5 times higher, and that's quite the possibility. এবং সেটা হয় এই কারণেই যে তোমার হচ্ছে যে because compressive load tries to close the cracks, and brittle materials have absolutely no resistance against crack opening. So for a ductile material, if the crack tries to open, the crack might also become blunt, and the process might stop. But for ductile material, that is not how it is going to happen, because brittle materials, it is not going to happen, because materials are not going to have any plastic deformation. এবার তুমি যখন compressive load দাও, the material actually doesn't fail due to compression. The failure stress in shear is actually smaller than the failure stress in compression, maybe slightly higher than the failure stress in tension, but much smaller compared to the failure stress in compression. Actually তুমি যদি brittle material-এর জন্য maximum principal stress theory use করো, that will tell you the failure stress in shear is failure stress in tension. But that is also not true. For most brittle materials, the failure stress in shear is actually slightly higher than the failure stress in tension, but it is way smaller than the failure stress in compression. তাতে করে কি হয়, তুমি যখন compressive load দাও, the material doesn't fail due to compression, it fails due to shear. Okay, so it identifies the plane that are the maximum shear planes, basically 45-degree planes, and along those planes there is a zigzag pattern which ultimately leads to failure. ঠিক আছে?
We will be now talking about the buckling test. Buckling, as you know, involves columns, let's say long slender columns, and when a column is subject to axial load, in this case vertical axial load. And if the column is long, it comes from the slenderness ratio, namely L/K. So if the column is long, we are
মনে হচ্ছে এই ভিডিওটাতে সাউন্ড একটু কম আছে, সম্ভব হলে একটু হেডফোন লাগিয়ে নাও, তাহলে শুনতে পাবো না।
এন্ড স্যার একো হচ্ছে।
হ্যাঁ, আমি আমার এন্ডে বন্ধ করে দিচ্ছি, তাহলে রেকো হবে না।
চ্যাট বক্সে কি অ্যাটেন্ডেন্সটা দিয়ে দেবো?
দিয়ে দাও।
Concerned about its buckling. So the buckling test has to be done. That what is the critical buckling load? What's the meaning of that? Critical buckling load, if you recall the theory, it goes like this, that you are holding it under compressive load, and there is one particular load, one minimum load in a compressive fashion, vertical compressive fashion, one minimum load where a strange thing happens. And what is that? If you give a small push, let us say, from one of the sides, an infinitesimal small push, then it buckles, it gets deflected, and you don't get back the original configuration. So that is the thing, that you don't get back the original configuration. Before that load, what happens is that you give a small deflection, small force, you take away the force, and it comes back to the original configuration. But after that force, that is known as the critical buckling load. After that force, what will happen is that you give the small force and you take it away, but the material doesn't come back to the original configuration. It gets more and more deflected, and ultimately it fails. So that being our understanding of buckling load, we will go ahead with the experiment. In the experiment, what happens is that you will have, as you can see at the back, the spring testing machine, as we call it, in which what will happen is that we will have 3 thin rods. These rods we will be holding, and as you can see in the dictionary sense also, they're long, they're thin and long, and you people will measure the slenderness ratio. But these thin and long, rods, they will be subjected to compressive force, and then we will increase the compressive force. The force, as you can see from the dial indicator, that it will be measured. Afterwards, you can see in a close-up view that it will be measured in kg force, right? Kg force will be the units. Afterwards, you can convert it to newtons. So, what is the force at which the buckling will take place, and there will be rapid development? You recall that in tensile testing, what happens is that you increase the force, then there will be certain deflection, and at one point of time, you are unable to apply any more load, but the deflection continues. That we know as the yield point. Here, similarly, as you increase the force, there will be deflection that will be measured, and then at one point of time, you are unable to increase the load, and yet the deflection goes, increases by leaps and bounds. So that is the critical buckling load. We will take note of that. That is job number 1 finished in the laboratory. So coming to what you have to do in the laboratory, you will have the thin rods. You will measure their lengths and their diameters. Diameters incidentally will be measured in 3 places, and you take the average. So the length is known, diameter is known, and then you find out the critical buckling load, finished, and then you go back home. So what is your homework? Homework is that based on the length and the diameter, you can always find out the moment of inertia. And for this type of rod, which will be held within 2 hinges, so both ends will be hinged. So for this arrangement, we know some expression for critical load, that is P critical is equal to pi squared EI by L squared. So back home, your job will be to find out that value, pi squared times E for mild still, and then I, pi squared EI, I you will measure divided by L squared. So from there you will get the critical buckling load. Maybe it will come in newtons, and as we were telling, that whatever value you have noted down from the laboratory, that comes in kgf, so you convert and then you compare. So that's all. And having said that, you can see that this is how the rod looks like. This is how the rod looks like. So one has to measure the length and then the diameter. The diameter has to be measured in 3 places. In 3 different places the diameter will be measured and the average will be taken. So diameter is measured with a vernier. That we are not showing because that is obvious. We will show you the job sheet where the diameter has been measured in 3 places, the average has been taken, and then the length has been taken. So you will see the lab sheet, where you will see the diameter and the length, and from there on we will go ahead with the experiment, right? So please show me the job sheet. So I will show you the job sheet. In the job sheet you will see that, in the job sheet you will see that these diameters are given. These diameters are given. Hey, Aste. These diameters are given in the job sheet, and then the lengths are given. So from these 3 diameters, the average is taken, then the length is measured. So length and diameter, as we were saying, that these will be available from laboratory measurements. Your job back home will be to find out I. Then you know the slenderness ratio K. This one will be obtained from the laboratory, the P critical value. Then P critical you will measure pi squared EI by L squared. Then what is this L by K? L by K is this one is the radius of gyration K, and L by K is the slenderness ratio. So based on your theoretical understanding, you will have to make a comment. You will have to learn that what is the slenderness ratio and how is the critical load related to it. In other words, how the slenderness ratio is really affecting the phenomenon of buckling. So that's all. With that understanding, we will go ahead with the experimentation. আচ্ছা তুমি ফিট করো রব তোমরা আমাকে বলবে যে কখন বলতে আরম্ভ করবে
বলুন এই হিঞ্জে আটকানো হচ্ছে
See, the rod is fitted within hinges, as you can see, keeping it vertical. It will remain just little loose. That means the hinge action is all right. Otherwise, it becomes a fixed support. So now we are in a position to go on increasing the load. Now you see that the spring testing machine will show that the load is increasing. Initially, it will have to be set to 0. That is being done now. Yes, it has come. Now the load is slowly increased. Yeah, so it has been obtained, and this is 0.8 kg, as we can see. Once again, we will show this. Yes, a zoomed view. 0.8 is the position where the buckling has occurred, and we will once again look at the rod. You see, it has buckled. It has buckled means, as we said, that the load was, we were unable to increase the load. So that means the buckling point has been reached. So that is, buckling point is, 0.8. So here you will see that the value of 0.8 is put next. So you see that the first reading, once again, the material is MS, the 3 diameters are noted, the mean diameter is calculated. This you will do back home. Then the length is noted in the laboratory. Keeping next 2 columns blank, in the laboratory we have noted down this buckling force, which is 0.8 kgf. And once again, let me tell you that this kgf has to be transferred to newtons for proper comparison. So now we will see the second and third readings. Now the second experiment. In this second experiment, we will take another rod, and once again, you know that diameter of the rod will have to be measured and the length. And this we have done as we are making this video. In the meantime, we have measured. So afterwards, you will see that this one is a thicker one. With a thicker rod, we are going ahead. And here is the arrangement. Yes. This time a higher load is being taken. We can see. So here you see buckling has come. Buckling has come, and you will see the reading. The reading is 4.2. This time it is 4.2 kgf. This was only to be expected. We will come to this one. We will take the picture. You see, now the rod is a fatter one, thicker one. So these are the values of the diameters that we got. So this is the average one. You see, it's almost double or near to double. And this is the length. So the load is, 4.2. So once again, your job will be to find out L by K in this case, and to see how slenderness ratio is affecting the critical buckling load. Now we will go ahead with the third one. Third one, as you can see now only, we have already measured. The third one is still thicker. So the average diameter turned out to be 6.29. The length is same as before, 100. And now we will see how the load turns out. Now the third and last reading, as we said, that we are now going ahead with a thicker rod. And once again, coolly, let us understand that the rod is thicker, the length is same, and we are going to do the experiment afresh. And what is our, the procedure? What are we really looking for? We were increasing the load and at the same time observing the rod. It's buckling. We are increasing the load, it's getting more and more buckled. But at one point of time, surprisingly and happily, you increase the load, but the buckling doesn't increase. So that means we have arrived at the critical buckling load. So with that, we will go ahead with the experiment. See now the load is being 0 has been set. Now the load is being increased. You cannot see the reading, but look at the rod. Look at the rod, and you see you see the rod is getting buckled. Yes, the rod is getting buckled. As you can see, and now it has reached the extreme. It is no more being buckled. So that comes from eye estimation, and one can feel also. Now if you look at that dial gauge indicator, it is showing something like 14.4. 14.4 means much higher value. Now this time it's coming. So this time you see that these are the diameters, as we were already telling you. This is the length, and a very high value has come of critical load, 14.4. So once again you will find L by K. L is visible, so L by K you will find out for this one, and again do the needful. You see in the procedure it is written, determine the slenderness ratio to ascertain whether the Euler's column formula is valid. So from slenderness ratio you can ascertain. So that is a very important part of the job, that whether Euler's column formula is valid. So that part is really a part of theory, but that is where the slenderness ratio becomes important. Number two, space the specimen on supports which act as hinges. You have already seen. Apply pressure along the central line of the bar with the help of the spring testing machine. Record the critical load and compare with the calculated value. So that's all for this experiment. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. We'll start with if you have any question regarding the experiment.
ক্রিটিক্যাল লোডে পৌঁছে যাওয়ার পর কি আর লোডটা বাড়ানো যাচ্ছিল না ওখানে মেশিনটা দিয়ে?
ঠিক আছে, আমরা আমরা এই বিষয়টা একটু পরে আনসার দেওয়ার চেষ্টা করব। আচ্ছা, টেকনিক্যালি তাই হওয়ার কথা, or rather যেটা হওয়ার কথা যে at that point ধরো যে কোনো সিস্টেম কিভাবে কাজ করে, ধরো স্প্রিং টেস্টিং এ তুমি যেভাবে কাজ করেছিলে, you are probably giving the deflection at a constant rate. So if you rotate the wheel, so you apply the deflection gradually, and what happens when you reach that, as we discussed earlier, that is not a true critical load but a representative load. So whatever that might be at that load or beyond that load, the load might increase slightly, but because it is not theoretical critical load, it is smaller than that. That's why it might increase slightly, but that rate would be much lower. Okay, so earlier it was kind of proportional, but later it would be quite flat. The change would be quite flat. That's how we identify a representative critical load. আচ্ছা, এবার যেটা আমার কতগুলো প্রশ্ন আছে। প্রথম কথা হচ্ছে যে what we tried to model here was the pinned column. Okay, what we tried to do the experiment on was pinned column, but we didn't use any hinges or pin joints. So how did we accomplish the pin support in that experiment? আমরা এই এক্সপেরিমেন্টটাতে পিন সাপোর্ট কি করে পেলাম? পিন তো আমরা ইউজ করিনি, পিন জয়েন্ট কোথাও ইউজ করিনি, শুধু দুটো এন্ডের মাঝে একটা কলমকে রেখে দিয়ে তাকে সাপোর্ট করে দিলাম। এই উত্তরটা কিন্তু খুব সিম্পল। এটা হচ্ছে ফার্স্ট অ্যাসাইনমেন্ট কোশ্চেন, লিখে নাও খাতার মধ্যে। ইট শুড বি ইন ইউর রিপোর্ট, অ্যান্ড আনসার টু দিস ওয়ান actually I don't want to give. You should be in a position to figure this out. So one hint, when it was supported in two faces, at the top and the bottom, it was supported through friction. Okay, and all you need to do is make an argument that that a frictional support under static friction works as good as a pin joint, but সেটা কিভাবে হয় সেটা একটু এক্সপ্লেন করতে হবে, ঠিক আছে? So that's how we could accomplish that, but how is a frictional support equivalent of a pin joint under static friction, of course, সেটাকে এক্সপ্লেন করতে হবে। আচ্ছা, that is first assignment question. Then I have another assignment question. So we had 3 columns, all of which were approximately 1 meter long, 1 meter, okay, as in 1,000 millimeters. Now there were 3 columns, okay, progressively thicker than the previous ones. So one was about 3 millimeter in diameter, then there was about 4.5 millimeter diameter, and then in the end there was 6.5 millimeter diameter of a column. Okay, now can you tell me which one of this column is a long column, short column, and a middle column? So that is an assignment question. Which one of the columns were a short column, which one was a long column, and which one was a middle column? Both had the same length. Okay, so it's the diameter that could make any difference. Can you answer that question? এর উত্তরটা দেওয়া যাবে না?
স্যার ওই স্লেন্ডারের রেশিওটা বার করবো, দিয়ে সেটা দেখবো ওটা মানে মিডল
Really?
কলমের ক্ষেত্রে পড়ছে না।
রিয়েলি তোমাকে স্লেন্ডারনেস রেশিও, হ্যাঁ ডেফিনেটলি বার করবে, কিন্তু সেটার জন্য তোমাকে পরে ক্যালকুলেট করে দেখতে হবে। First of all,
তাহলে
দেখো,
স্যার যেটা
আচ্ছা, আমি
বেশি
একটু বলি।
ডায়ামিটার সেটা হচ্ছে কি লং কলম।
আচ্ছা একটু বলি। দেখো, আমরা কি দেখলাম যে স্লেন্ডারনেস রেশিওটা 100-র উপরে হলে that is more or less a long column. ঠিক আছে? The highest diameter that you had were about 6 millimeters, whereas the columns were about 1 meter long, 1,000 millimeters. So the length to diameter ratio is no less than 150. Okay, but we are talking about slenderness ratio, which is the ratio of length to radius of gyration. Okay, even for the largest diameter, so how much is the radius of gyration? Radius of gyration is 1/4 of the diameter for a circular section. Okay, of course, if it is not a circular section, then what is the diameter? Radius of gyration is d by 4. So the ratio would be at least 4 times higher. So at least 600. 600 is the lowest slenderness ratio of the 3 columns. Okay, so the point is all the 3 columns are long columns, and if all the 3 columns were not long columns, during the experiment one of the columns would not fail due to geometric failure, rather fail due to material failure, মানে প্লাস্টিক ডিফর্মেশন হয়ে যাবে। মানে পরের বার তোমাদের পরের ব্যাচের জন্য, বা তোমাদের তো 6টা গ্রুপকে সেই এক্সপেরিমেন্টটা করে দেখানো যাবে না একই কলাম দিয়ে, কিন্তু বছরের পর বছর ওই 3টে কলাম দিয়ে এক্সপেরিমেন্টটা করে দেখানো যাচ্ছে। তার মানে দাঁড়ায় they are only going through, they may be buckling, but they are only going through elastic deformation. As you know, plastic deformation is permanent deformation, in a sense that once you remove the load, the material doesn't regain its configuration. So so all the columns are long columns. They all undergo deformations under elastic limit, and they all buckle, and also they all have eccentricity. And that's where I'm coming to your answer to your question. Okay, এইটা কলাম বাকলিং এর একটা এক্সপেরিমেন্টের সিমুলেশন অ্যানসিসে করা, এবং আমার মনে হয় যদিও আমরা আজকে একটা এক্সপেরিমেন্ট করেছি, অনেকখানি থিওরি ডিসকাশন করেছি, তবু এই সিমুলেশনটা থেকে আমরা নতুন কিছু শিখতে পারবো, অ্যাডিশনাল কিছু শিখতে পারবো, সেই জন্যই দেখাচ্ছি। এবং এই সিমুলেশনটা 3 সেকেন্ডের, কিন্তু প্রথম 1 সেকেন্ডের মধ্যে অনেক কিছু ঘটবে, সেটা একটু ভালো করে খেয়াল করতে হবে। সো দ্যাটস ওয়াই আই পজ দ্য ভিডিও অ্যান্ড আই এম গোইং টু শো ইট ফ্রেম বাই ফ্রেম। একটা জিনিস বলে দিই যে when you are trying to simulate in your AFE software, let's say buckling of a column or buckling of any nature, the fact is a finite element software works based on a stiffness matrix. Okay, finite element method সম্পর্কে তোমরা অলরেডি কেউ কেউ হয়তো জানো, যারা খুব ভালো ছিল তারা জানো, বাকিরা হয়তো জানো না, জেনে যাবে আগামী 1 বছরের মধ্যে বা 1.5 বছরের মধ্যে। তো finite element মেথডে there is deflection, there is force, and there lies a stiffness matrix. In a simplest form, that's what a finite element method is. এবার একটু আগে বললাম না যে বাকলিং এর সময় ল্যাটারাল স্টিফনেসটা 0 হয়ে যায়। সো এভরি টাইম there is a stiffness 0, প্রবলেম কি হয়ে যায়, the stiffness matrix times the deflection becomes the force, right? So you are looking for the deflection, and we are given the forces, and we are simply inverting the stiffness matrix. But stiffness matrix এর কিছু কিছু টার্ম 0 হয়ে গেলে সেটাকে ইনভার্ট করা যায় না, এবং সেক্ষেত্রে ফাইনাইট এলিমেন্টের সলিউশনটা নন ফিজিবল হয়ে যায়। তো সেই জন্য ফাইনাইট এলিমেন্ট মেথডে সলভ করতে গেলে একটা বাকলিং প্রবলেমকে, সেটাকে এসেন্ট্রিক বাকলিং এর ফর্মেই করতে হয়। তার জন্য আমি কি করেছি, এই স্ট্রাকচারটাকে একটা নেগেটিভ ওয়াই ডিরেকশনে একটা অ্যাক্সেলারেশন ডিউ টু গ্র্যাভিটি দিয়েছি, বা গ্র্যাভিটেশনাল বডি ফোর্স দিয়েছি, যাতে করে ডিউ টু সেলফ ওয়েট এ নিজে থেকে একটা এসেন্ট্রিসিটি তৈরি করে নেয়। মানে তোমরা হয়তো খালি চোখে দেখে বুঝতে পারছো না, বাট ইট ইজ অলরেডি হ্যাঙ্গিং ডিউ টু ইটস ওন ওয়েট, মানে বেন্ডিং ডিউ টু ইটস ওন ওয়েট। এবং তাতে করে আমার পক্ষে এই বাকলিংয়ের সিমুলেশনটা করা সম্ভব হবে, বিকজ দ্যাট ওয়ে আই হ্যাভ এসেন্ট্রিক বাকলিং, অ্যান্ড এসেন্ট্রিক বাকলিং হ্যাপেন্স গ্র্যাজুয়ালি, ঠিক আছে? বাট স্টিল উই উইল বি এবল টু আইডেন্টিফাই আ বাকলিং লোড ফর দিস ওয়ান। এবং বাকলিং লোডটাকে আমরা আইডেন্টিফাই করবো কি করে, যেভাবে অ্যাকচুয়াল এক্সপেরিমেন্টে করছি, টু মেজার, টু সামহাউ সেন্স দ্য রিয়াকশন ফোর্স অ্যাট ওয়ান অফ দ্য এন্ডস। তো এই যে গ্রিন এন্ডটা দেখছো, এই গ্রিন এন্ডে আমরা হচ্ছে রিয়াকশন ফোর্স কতটা তার একটা সেন্সার লাগিয়েছি, সেই সেন্সটা আমরা করবো ওয়াইল ডুইং দ্য এক্সপেরিমেন্ট। এবং যেহেতু আমি আচ্ছা এটা একটু চালিয়ে দেখা যাক, আমি একটা ফ্রেম চালিয়ে দেখাই। দেখো শুরুতেই আমি একটা রিয়াকশন ফোর্স পেলাম, কিন্তু এই রিয়াকশন ফোর্সটা কিন্তু প্রপারলি অ্যাক্সিসের সঙ্গে অ্যালাইন নয়। দেখো শুরুতেই কি হয়ে রয়েছে, কলামটা ডিউ টু ইটস ওন ওয়েট একটু বেন্ড হয়ে রয়েছে। এই যে সার্কেলগুলো হুইচ মার্কস দ্য অ্যাক্সিস অফ দ্য কলাম, তার সঙ্গে কিন্তু অ্যাকচুয়াল কলামটা অ্যালাইন নেই, মানে আনডিফর্ম কলামের যে কনফিগারেশনটা তার সঙ্গে কিন্তু এটা অ্যালাইন নেই। ইট ইজ বেন্ডিং ডিউ টু ইটস ওন ওয়েট, দ্যাট ইজ মাই ওয়ে অফ গিভিং ইট অ্যান এসেন্ট্রিসিটি। 2 নম্বর পয়েন্ট, যে you see that reaction force right there, that is also not aligned with the axis. Why? Because the reaction force is not only due to the axial force, but in part it is also due to the gravitational force. মানে আমি গ্র্যাভিটেশনাল ফোর্স লাগিয়েছি কলামটার উপরে, ইউনিফর্মলি ডিস্ট্রিবিউটেড বডি ফোর্স, and at the to support the reaction force is not downwards but upwards. মানে বডিটার উপরে গ্র্যাভিটেশনাল ফোর্সটা হচ্ছে ডাউনওয়ার্ডস, সো দ্য রিয়াকশন ফোর্স এট দ্য টু এন্ডস ইজ আপওয়ার্ডস, হুইচ ইজ কিপিং দ্য অবজেক্ট ইন ইকুইলিব্রিয়াম। And because there is an upward force at at each support, at each end, because it is simply supported, সেই আপওয়ার্ড রিয়াকশনটার জন্য the reaction force vector, this arrow right here, is slightly tilted towards above, plus y. Okay, and let's see what happens if I gradually increase the axial load. Now it is aligning itself more with the axis of the column. Okay, and then it will grow. এবার এই পয়েন্ট অনওয়ার্ডস দেখো কি হচ্ছে, গ্রো করছিল। ওকে, লাইক দ্যাট উড হ্যাপেন উইথ অ্যাক্সিয়াল কম্প্রেশন। ওকে, কিন্তু আমরা আগেই বলে নিয়েছি দিস ইজ এসেন্ট্রিক বাকলিং, সো there has been substantial buckling by now. Okay, and more would happen, but what happens to the support reaction? সাপোর্ট রিয়াকশনটা একটা জায়গায় গিয়ে ফ্রিজ হয়ে যাচ্ছে। ভালো করে খেয়াল করো, গ্র্যাজুয়ালি যেরকম বাড়ছিল সেরকম আর বাড়ছে না, একটা জায়গায় গিয়ে ফ্রিজ হয়ে যাচ্ছে। এই যে ফ্রিজ হয়ে যাওয়াটা আর গ্র্যাজুয়ালি যে চেঞ্জটা হচ্ছিল সেটা আস্তে আস্তে কাইন্ড অফ বন্ধ হয়ে যাওয়া, এই বন্ধ হয়ে যাওয়ার পয়েন্টটাতে উই উড নোট ডাউন ইট অ্যাজ দ্য বাকলিং লোড। অ্যারোটা শুরুর দিকে যেরকম র্যাপিডলি বাড়ছিল আর কিন্তু বাড়ছে না, সেটা একটু খেয়াল রাখতে হবে। ওকে, so does that answer your question?
হ্যাঁ স্যার, মানে এই ফোর্সটা না বাড়লে ওই মানে ডিফরমেশনটা আস্তে আস্তে বেড়ে যাবে।
বেড়ে যাবে, হ্যাঁ। যেমন ইল্ডিং এর ক্ষেত্রে আমরা দেখেছিলাম যে এক্সটেন্সোমিটারের কাঁটা ঘুরছে কিন্তু ফোর্স বাড়ছে না, সেম জিনিস। বেসিক্যালি ফ্রিকশন যখন স্ট্যাটিক থেকে কাইনেটিক ফ্রিকশনে যায়, একটা অবজেক্টকে তুমি ফোর্স দিয়ে ঠেলছো কিন্তু মুভ করছে না, ফোর্সটা যেই লিমিটিং ফ্রিকশনে গেল মুভ করতে শুরু করে দিল, হুইচ ইজ আ রিজিড পারফেক্টলি প্লাস্টিক বিহেভিয়ার, এক্স্যাক্টলি সেম অ্যাজ থিওরিটিক্যাল বাকলিং, নো ডিফারেন্স ম্যাথামেটিক্যালি। অ্যান্ড মানে আমরা বলি না যে ইকুইলিব্রিয়াম ক্যান বি অফ স্টেবল ইকুইলিব্রিয়াম, আনস্টেবল ইকুইলিব্রিয়াম অ্যান্ড নিউট্রাল ইকুইলিব্রিয়াম, এই পার্টটা ডিসকাস করাটা আমার হয়নি। স্টেবল ইকুইলিব্রিয়াম ইজ ওয়েন আ কোন ইজ প্লেসড অন ইটস বেস, unstable equilibrium is when it is placed on its vertex, and neutral equilibrium is when it is placed on its curved surface. So every position is an equilibrium position, which is what happens with buckling. So buckling is that situation when you go from stable equilibrium, which would have been the axial compression, the stable equilibrium, you go from stable equilibrium to unstable equilibrium, and the phase of buckling is basically the neutral equilibrium. Any amount of deflection delta is an equilibrium configuration, is going to give you an equilibrium configuration. That's what is neutral equilibrium. So buckling is basically in the zone of neutral to unstable equilibrium. You know that if the substantial amount of buckling happens, all of those linear equations would not be valid and ultimately it would lead to instability. But you know, the phase we identify as buckling is that neutral equilibrium zone. Okay,
হ্যাঁ স্যার।
ওকে, রিপোর্ট একটু মন দিয়ে ভালো করে পড়াশোনা করে লিখবে, এরকম রিপোর্ট হলে কিন্তু ভাইবাও এরকমই হবে, বোঝাই যাচ্ছে কি হবে।
স্যার বলছি আগের দিনের রিপোর্টে একটা টেবিলে একটা কোশ্চেন ছিল, বলবো?
হ্যাঁ বলো।
বলছি স্যার একটা দিয়েছে ডিস্টেন্স ফ্রম সেন্টার অফ পারকুশন ফ্রম স্মল এন্ড সেন্টার, মানে ওর যে ইকুয়েশনটা করেছে ওটা করার সময় কি আমাদের অ্যাক্সিসটা ওই স্মল এন্ড সেন্টার দিয়ে পাস করতে ধরে করতে হবে?
কোন অ্যাক্সিসটা?
মানে যেই অ্যাক্সিসের সাপেক্ষে অক্সিলেশনটা হচ্ছে,
না না না,
ওটা তো আমরা স্যার উপরে ধরেছিলাম,
না,
মানে
না,
ইনার সেন্টারটা।
না, না, ওটা তোমার ধরার কোনো দরকারই নেই, তোমাকে তো শুধু একটা মানে ডাইমেনশন ক্যালকুলেট করতে দিয়েছে, সেই ডাইমেনশনটা ক্যালকুলেট করবার জন্য তোমাকে অ্যাক্সিসটা ওখান থেকে ধরতে হবে কিনা, না ওই সেন্টারে তুমি ধরতে হবে না। তুমি মানে বেসিক্যালি তুমি যখন হচ্ছে যে ধরো সেন্টার অফ পারকাশনের ডিস্টেন্স কত, আর বার প্লাস কাপা বার স্কোয়ার ডিভাইডেড বাই আর বার, তুমি একটা এন্ড থেকে আর বার বার করে নিলে যদি পেয়ে যাও আলটিমেটলি এবং করেসপন্ড মানে তুমি পুরো এটা তোমার কানেক্টিং রডটা তুমি কাপা বার যদি পেয়ে যাও, দেন ইউ ক্যান ফাইন্ড আউট দ্য ডিস্টেন্স ফ্রম দ্য পিভট পয়েন্ট টু দ্য সেন্টার অফ পারকাশন, মানে যেখানে নাইফ এজটা বসানো হবে, ঠিক আছে? এবার এই ডিস্টেন্সটা থেকে তুমি শুধু হচ্ছে যে মানে ওই যে স্মল হোল বা লার্জ হোল যাই হোক না কেন তার রেডিয়াসটা সাবট্রাক্ট করলেই তো তুমি ওই বাকি ডিস্টেন্সটা পেয়ে যাবে।
কিন্তু স্যার এখানে ফর্মুলাটা অন্য আছে, ওটাতে আসছে না দেখলাম, মানে দেয়া রয়েছে L ইকুয়াল টু A প্লাস।
এখানে যে ফর্মুলাগুলো দেয়া রয়েছে সেটা অ্যাকর্ডিং টু দ্য ফর্মুলেশন ডিসকাসড ইন দ্য এক্সপেরিমেন্ট ভিডিও, এক্সপেরিমেন্টের ভিডিওর মধ্যে দেখবে স্যার কিছু একটা ডেরিভেশন দেখাচ্ছেন, তার সঙ্গে ওটা মানে ম্যাচ করবে, ঠিক আছে? আমার মতে তোমরা ওই ইনস্ট্রাকশন শিটটা যেরকম যেরকম ফর্মুলা দেওয়া আছে সেই অনুযায়ী ফিল আপ করো, স্যার দেখবেন একটা কারেকশনও প্রোভাইড করেছেন সেটাও করো, ঠিক আছে? কিন্তু while doing the correction আমার মনে হয় আমি যেভাবে ক্লাসে ডিসকাস করেছি that would be a lot simpler way to do the calculation, মানে যেখান থেকে তুমি ন্যাচারাল ফ্রিকোয়েন্সি এন্ড রেডিয়াস অফ জাইরেশন, সরি যেখান থেকে তুমি ন্যাচারাল ফ্রিকোয়েন্সি থেকে রেডিয়াস অফ জাইরেশন বার করছো সেই পার্টের ক্যালকুলেশনটা তুমি ক্লাসে আমরা যেভাবে ডিসকাস করেছি সেভাবে করো, আর যেটা ইনস্ট্রাকশন শিটে ফিল আপ করতে দিয়েছে সেখানে যা যা ফর্মুলা রয়েছে সেই অনুযায়ী ফিল আপ করে দাও।
ঠিক আছে। আর স্যার এই ফর্মুলাগুলো একটা প্রুফ করতে দিয়েছে, ওটা তাহলে থিওরিতে না করে যে কোশ্চেনটা আছে ওই কোশ্চেনেই তাহলে করে দিই,
ঠিক আছে,
মানে টেবিলের ফর্মুলাগুলো।
ঠিক আছে।
আর একটা কোশ্চেন আছে, দা রেজাল্ট ইন ইনার্সিয়া ফোর্স অফ এ কানেক্টিং রড ইন রেসিপ্রোকেটিং
না না
মেশিন।
শোনো, তোমাকে ওই ফর্মুলাগুলো ডিরাইভও করতে হবে না, তুমি ক্লাসে যে ডেরিভেশনটা দেখেছো তুমি সেইটা পুট করলেও চলবে।
ঠিক আছে। আরেকটা স্যার বলছি যে রেজাল্ট ইন ইনার্সিয়া ফোর্সটা কি রেসিপ্রোকেটিং মেশিনের সিজি দিয়ে যাবে?
তোমায় ভাবতে হবে, যদি সিজি দিয়ে ইনার্শিয়া ফোর্স যায়, যদি সিজি দিয়ে ইনার্শিয়া ফোর্সটা যায় তাহলে 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 কি অবজেক্টটা রোটেট করবে? মানে ধরো একটা কানেক্টিং রড যখন অ্যাকচুয়াল পারফরমেন্স অফ দ্য ইঞ্জিন, ডাজ ইট অনলি ট্রান্সলেট অর ডাজ ইট রোটেট অলসো?
ট্রান্সলেটও করে আর রোটেটও করে, দুটোই করে।
যদি রোটেট করে তাহলে কি ইনার্শিয়া ফোর্সটা মানে তাহলে তো ইনার্শিয়ার দুটো পার্ট রয়েছে, একটা হচ্ছে ট্রান্সলেশন আর একটা হচ্ছে রোটেশন। এবার রোটেশনের জন্য লাগছে হচ্ছে তোমার মোমেন্ট, আর ট্রান্সলেশনের জন্য লাগছে হচ্ছে ফোর্স। তাহলে এই যে ফোর্স আর মোমেন্ট, এর জন্য ফোর্স মোমেন্টের আমরা ইকুইভ্যালেন্ট ফোর্স সিস্টেম করতে শিখেছি। এই ফোর্সটা তুমি ভাবো যদি শুধু ফোর্সটা, ইনার্শিয়ার যে ফোর্সটা সেটা সিজিতে তুমি অ্যাপ্লাই করলে, তার সঙ্গে অ্যাডিশনাল কাপল মোমেন্ট যেটার জন্য রোটেশন হচ্ছে সেটা অ্যাপ্লাই করলে, তাহলে কি যখন তুমি এটাকে ইকুইভ্যালেন্ট সিঙ্গেল ফোর্স সিস্টেমে কনভার্ট করবে, ইকুইভ্যালেন্ট সিঙ্গেল ফোর্স সিস্টেম যেখানে হচ্ছে তুমি ওই ইনার্শিয়া ফোর্সটাকে এমন একটা জায়গায় নিয়ে চলে যাবে যে তোমাকে আলাদা করে মোমেন্টটা দিতে হবে না, বিকজ অফ ইটস ডিস্টেন্স ফ্রম দ্য সিজি দেয়ার উড বি আ মোমেন্ট অ্যাবাউট দ্য সিজি। তাহলে তখন কি এটা সিজি থ্রুতে কাজ করবে সেই সিঙ্গেল ইকুইভ্যালেন্ট ফোর্সটা? এইগুলো একটু ভাবতে হবে।
ঠিক আছে,
ঠিক আছে।
স্যার রিপোর্টে থিওরি ছাড়া আর কি কি আমাদের ভুল ছিল, নাকি জাস্ট থিওরির জন্যই মানে মার্কস
থিওরি
কম
পার্ট
হবে?
ছিল না, কিছু কারো কারো ক্ষেত্রে হচ্ছে এইটাও ছিল না, তোমার হচ্ছে অ্যাসাইনমেন্ট টোশ্চেনও আমি পাইনি, বা এমন ভাবে হয়ে থাকতে পারে যে অ্যাসাইনমেন্ট কোশ্চেন হয়তো সাবমিট করেছে কিন্তু রোল নাম্বার দেয়নি, সেটা আমি খুঁজে পাইনি। পরে যারা কয়েকজন আমাকে রোল নাম্বার এক্সেট্রা দিয়ে পাঠিয়েছিল সেগুলো আমি আলাদা করে ইনকর্পোরেট করেছি। আর এছাড়া হচ্ছে মানে লেখার মান, যে ধরো মানে মানে একটা রিপোর্ট, একটা অ্যাসাইনমেন্ট, একটা তোমার হচ্ছে যে পরীক্ষায় যেরকম ভাবে লেখে নিট অ্যান্ড ক্লিন, তুমি তো অনেকটা সময় পাচ্ছ রিপোর্টটা লেখার জন্য, সেটাকে সেরকম ভাবে লেখা নয় আর কি, সেই ক্ষেত্রে হয়তো নাম্বার কাটা গেছে। কিছু ক্ষেত্রে কিছু ছবি থাকা হয়তো উচিত ছিল, যে সেগুলো মূলত থিওরিরই পার্ট, থিওরিতে সেইগুলো হয়তো বলা হয়েছে বা দেখানো হয়েছে, সেইগুলো নেই। এইরকমই কিছু কিছু, সেইগুলোর জন্যই মূলত নাম্বার কাটা গেছে।
ওকে স্যার, অ্যাসাইনমেন্ট পিডিএফ এর লাস্টে অ্যাটাচ করে দিয়েছিলাম, তো মানে
Okay.
ওর মধ্যে আলাদা করে রোল নাম্বার লিখিনি, তো সেটা অন্য কি?
সেটা যদি হয়ে থাকে তাহলে অ্যাসাইনমেন্টটা যদি আলাদা পিডিএফ এ করে থাকো তাতে
না
roll
স্যার,
number টা
আলাদা পিডিএফ না স্যার, স্যার ডিনেলের লাস্টেই আর এবং রকলের লাস্টেই দুটো পেজ আমার
না সেগুলো আমি চেক
assignment
করেছি।
আচ্ছা স্যার, আচ্ছা স্যার।
ওকে,
হ্যাঁ স্যার,
ঠিক আছে। তাহলে আমরা পরের মঙ্গলবার, মানে আগামীকাল মঙ্গলবার, তার এক সপ্তাহ বাদে আমাদের আর একটাই এক্সপেরিমেন্ট বাকি আছে, সেইটা করবো। ঠিক আছে।
ঠিক আছে স্যার।